everyone. So since today is at the time of filming, this is a few days before the anniversary of the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. I thought originally I thought about just doing one video or a stream on the anniversary of the conquest to discuss it. However, today I thought I would give the background to why Mehmed the Conqueror, Fatih Sultan Mehmed as he's known in Turkey, usually was able to actually conquer the Ottoman or the Byzantine remnants, let's say. And I wanted to start with not the beginning of Ottoman history, but rather where I think is a major turning point in the history of the empire, which is the basically the decapitation of the state in 1402 at Ankara, and then the civil war that ensues for about 11 years. I think that is much more important to the success that Mehmed the Conqueror was able to achieve in 1453. The earlier Ottoman state, it was more medieval, similar to their medieval European peers in the sense that the monarch and the aristocracy as such were either at odds or on a similar footing. And in the Ottoman case, it was much less bureaucratic than the later empire. And you tend in the chronicles for the 1300s and even into the 15th century, you tend to see the same kind of families coming up over and over in the state and in important provincial positions. And as the empire it became more complex in its administration, that you would not really see that as much. But what happens in 1402 is the death of Bayezid the First. Oh, that's Timur. We'll get to him in a second. This is a later illustration, I think, but this is Bayezid the First, Bayezid the Thunderbolt, who just about 3 years before had inflicted a major blow on the Crusaders at the Battle of Nicopolis in 1399, and was kind of on top of the world, let's say, or was a successful sultan. And what happens at this time is the Ottoman Sultanate is not totally dominant in Anatolia. There are still a lot of these Turkoman groups who resent the Ottoman dynasty asserting itself in the region, and they appeal to Timur, or Tamerlane, as he's often known in the West, however you'd like to call him, and who rules over Iran. Timur is a Turco-Mongol conqueror. He establishes the Timurid Empire, which lasts until about the early beginning of the 16th century, when it begins to disintegrate, essentially. And he defeats Bayezid at the Battle of Ankara because many of the Turkoman emirs that were allied to the Ottomans defect to Timur, and the Ottoman army is defeated. Interestingly, the Serbian knights that were vassals of the Ottoman Empire fight with Bayezid. Kind of interesting turn of events. And what ensues is a major collapse in basically Ottoman authority in Anatolia. This map is a bit later, but this is more or less the territory that the empire or the sultanate, I would prefer to say at this time, would have possessed some of the Balkans and some, but not all, of Anatolia. And I think it's important to note, as much as the Ottoman Sultanate and Empire fought Christian rivals to the west throughout its history, it was also heavily engaged again with other Muslim polities to its east. And this was also extremely controversial among Muslims, which is why the Anatolian beyliks resented Bayezid and wanted intervention by Timur. So, if you'd like to think about it, international interventions are really nothing new. These things have probably been happening since the first complex states and international systems emerged in the Bronze Age. But as I said, this all falls apart in Ankara. The Beylik lords, the other Turkomans, defect. Bayezid is killed. There's a legend that Bayezid commits suicide at the hands of Timur. As far as I know, I think that's kind of a legend, but it does kind of evoke maybe the sentiment among Ottomans at the time of being totally defeated. And for about 9 months, Bayezid is just pillaging and plundering Anatolia. And then he reestablishes these smaller beyliks as constituents of his empire. Now, importantly for the Ottomans, Bayezid does not cross into the Balkans, the Ottoman Balkans, or Rumelia. And in 1403, Timur returns to Iran, to the center of his empire. And this inaugurates for the surviving sons of Bayezid, which is the title of the book that I'm getting material for this video for, so I'll put that in the description. This inaugurates about 11 years of conflict of essentially a civil war and a succession crisis. Now, ultimately, in 1413, Mehmed I becomes the sole sultan and reigns until 1421. And I guess I should discuss that the reason why the Ottoman succession was so messy goes back to Mongol ideas of succession that were also in force in the Turkic world, which is two kind of mixed, which is why it's called Turco-Mongol in scholarly literature. Is that the idea that every son has a right to the throne? There isn't a primogeniture. And for the Ottomans, they don't establish a more stable pattern of succession until the late 17th century. Now, how this plays out in the future Ottoman centuries is, or until the 17th century, is usually it's done within the palace, Or there's cases like with Suleiman the Magnificent, he was like the only son of Selim and things like that. But it was always the idea is that um, you would have um, the best person or the person on God's side would win in the end. Um, that's kind of the idea, at least. It doesn't always work out that way. The the defeat of Bayezid at Ankara had major consequences. The Ottomans had been besieging Constantinople for some time, and it looked like Constantinople would fall. And Timur comes as kind of an unintentional savior of the Byzantines in 1402. Um, and one of the reasons why they needed Constantinople, not only for its economic and symbolic value, but also geographically, of course, kind of a perennial thing, I think, in world history is who controls the Dardanelles Straits. This is something I think that will always be um, in force. And we even see those things come up to, diplomatic issues even today of controlling access to the Black Sea and the Dardanelles Straits. Um, but at any rate, once Timur leaves, the sons of Bayezid are basically surrounded by both hostile Christians and hostile Muslims. So there's no there's no Muslim solidarity here at this moment in time. However, among the Orthodox Christians in the Balkans, there's a lot of anti-Latin or anti-Western sentiment. It's too much to go into now, but there's a lot of bad blood on both sides. We'll just put it that way. Um, and but the Western powers and some of the Latins and some of the Easterners like the Byzantines and the Wallachians and also the Muslim Turkoman lords in Anatolia distinct seize on this to try and play the sons off of each other because they don't want another Bayezid the First, excuse me, in the region. And the Byzantines were able to do this to great effect, and of course, we know that they were managed to survive another 51 years, which is, I think, quite impressive actually when you think about it. I mean, that's at least another generation. Now, ultimately, the two by 1413 in the international scene, the two main actors, the Kingdom of Hungary and Byzantium, supported Mehmed, who becomes Mehmed the First, Sultan Mehmed the First, against his brother Musa, and ultimately, unintentionally, defeat themselves because obviously Mehmed is the one that takes the throne, even though Musa was the more aggressive one. Um, and that allows for a new Ottoman uh, ruler on the throne, and this period of divide and conquer from the neighbors of the Ottomans is no more. So, why is the Interregnum important for what is to come later. I think ultimately this is one of those moments in history where we can see that contingency is very important and we can't always predict the future. Uh, a lot of the time, the Ottoman expansion is depicted partly in more popular narratives and also in, I think, because of certain maps, the way certain maps are drawn, actually, it gives the impression that this was going to unfold in a very clear, kind of mechanical way. And even some of the scholarship by historians tends to lean into this. But this period of time of about 11 years, and I think that's important to emphasize that it did, the interregnum lasts for 11 years, is that this took a very long time to settle with between the fighting and the political and diplomatic jockeying amongst the Ottoman princes and their neighbors. And really, the Ottoman Beylik could have been completely destroyed, or one of the other sons may have taken the throne, and it's not really clear there's no way of knowing what would have happened in those cases. Um, so I think ultimately, but for the siege, and that will happen decades later, the fact that it is Mehmed I that ascends to the throne and is able to assert himself shows that the kind of centralizing tendency that had been pursued by his father, Bayezid I, won out, and that would be refined upon by Mehmed the Conqueror later on. And so I think this is an important moment, or not moment, I mean, it's really a period, era of Ottoman history of 11 years, over 11 years, and helps give helps transform this sultanate regional kind of power into a major world empire. It's also important from the ideological perspective, or it has a legacy, I think, in the ideological outlook of the empire of, will the Ottoman state be one Muslim power among many, or will it begin to, will the sultans and the religious authorities begin to fashion themselves more as the world kind of emperor? And that's an idea that is not exclusive to the Ottomans. But it reaches kind of this ideology kind of reaches its sort of peak intensity during the reign of Charles V and Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century, uh, where I think uh, the idea in later centuries that Timur or a power like the Timurids would be able to intervene against the Ottomans and challenge their authority would be completely unthinkable. But at this period of time, of course, the context is much different. Um, and I think that left a kind of mark on the ideology of the empire, especially in regard to other Muslim uh, polities, both that they neighbored directly and in the wider world. All right. Well, I hope that was interesting. Thanks for watching and or listening, however you'd like, and I will hopefully this week I will follow this up with something on the actual siege of Constantinople and Mehmed the Conqueror. All right. Have a good day or evening wherever you are.